must also take more than a passing interest on what their children are doing with the smartphone.
All right. So the starting point, as you say, is the family.
Yes.
To bring back those values of old. But when you step out of the family, or even remaining with the family, there are those who would say, well, there are so many factors today that have led to the disintegration of family values. And these are mainly economic, where families can no longer afford to raise offspring the way they should, either because they lack the resources to provide for them, and therefore they are left to develop on their own. Now, where does the state begin to come in the matter of creating the environment where families can thrive, at least having the basics? Because everyone would say to you, how do you appeal to the conscience of a man who is hungry?
Yeah, that's very correct. And now that takes us back to our very first question, the relationship between leadership, politics, and the economy. A country is so blessed, both in terms of material and human resources, like Nigeria, should ordinarily have no business. Look at the extent of the endowments. Start coming from the ocean, up through the rainforest, across to the swamp forest, come up into the Guinness. Savannah, come into the Sudan Savannah, go into the Sahel, and even the semi-temperate parts of northern Taraba and the Plateau. There is no crop that you cannot produce in this country within the context of these geographical locations that we have now identified. Look at the mineral endowment. Look at the weather. Perhaps one of the very few countries that you don't have to worry about when the weather is changing. Because what you are wearing, you wear it in Hamatan, you wear it during the rainy season, you wear it during the whole season, and you know, these are simple matters which we take for granted, but we do not know how much endowed we are and blessed. After every 3 months, if you want to go to Europe, you will have to ask the weatherman, what is the condition and what kind of dressing do I have to carry along with me? This doesn't happen in our country. So a country so blessed, a country so endowed, should have no business. Now, because the relationship between politics, leadership, and the economy is an intricate one, we can now begin to see that government has a direct responsibility. And when I say government, I mean government at all levels. The local government, which completely does not exist any longer in this country, and I stand to be corrected. The state governments, the federal government, each of them has a responsibility, because unless they are able to stand up and carry their functions clearly, conscientiously, patriotically, we will continue to witness a downward trend in spite of the massive resources at our disposal. And now this, therefore, brings me to the role of the citizen in what we are now seeing. Because like I have told you, the process through which a leader emerges, perhaps to me, is even much more important than the ultimate emergence. The process is very, very important. But when you allow leadership to come up through a process that is flawed, a leadership that is disconnected, a leadership that has no sense of empathy, a leadership that does not understand the principles, the basic principles of public service and the public trust. Now, to that same extent, will the society continue to suffer, because such a leadership cannot be held accountable, and therefore resources meant for public good can easily be appropriated, as we have seen in so many instances, to the detriment of the larger society. So why is the citizen expected to come in here? Vigilance, love for nation, take more than a passing interest in the political process and be part of it so that all of us will contribute in whatever little way we can as individuals and as a collective towards creating the kind of society that we all wish to see.
Right. And so on that premise, we'll move a step forward, the responsibilities of the citizen. And then we ask, how much information in this direction is available to the citizen? How much does the citizen know about its leadership structure and what its leadership intends to do? Now, you sit at the top of the National Orientation Agency, and we listed just a few of your responsibilities at the beginning of this program. How has the NWA helped in broadening the awareness and knowledge and scope of millions of Nigerians? And when I talk about these millions, I'm not referring to the ones who sit in Abuja, Lagos, Kano, Kaduna, Jos, and places like that. I'm talking about the people who are right in those rural areas. How much have you been able to bring to them what their responsibilities to the state should be and enlighten them on the responsibilities and the programs of the state to them?
Still, at the risk of sounding defeatist, I would say just like the nation, the National Orientation Agency is also overwhelmed. Because from whatever direction you look at it, this country seems to be walking into nothingness. Into nothingness. Drug addiction, vote buying and vote selling, dishonesty down the line, lack of tolerance, whether between and among neighbors and even among friends, societal failure at all fronts, lack of impact of government and government policies on the citizens. Now, when you look at all of this, and then you add it to what I have already identified as the failure of the family as a unit of character building, you can see that the issue is as overwhelming as it can be. But then, that does not mean that you just throw up your arms in the air and you just sit, with your arms akimbo and do nothing. I still feel that this country holds a great promise. I feel this country holds a great promise. And to this extent, therefore, information must be made available to the citizens on how they should understand the kind of promise that the country actually, even in the midst of this hopelessness, holds for each and every one of us. The National Orientation Agency, apart from communicating government policies, programs, and activities, has also the additional mandate, of value orientation, of information dissemination, and of eliciting feedback so that government policies can be redirected, reforecast, reassessed for purposes of service delivery, effective service delivery. How much information we are able to disseminate to the public actually depends from one area to another and from one topic to another. In most of the work that we do, because of the overwhelming challenges, we just necessarily have to find partners. We necessarily have to find partners. The country is big, large, expansive. The population is no less big. The population is big. The country is big and expansive. But by the structure of the agency, we have a very robust presence in all the 774 local governments who are present. So we are an agency of government that speaks almost all Nigerian languages. Because in the local government, we have community mobilization officers. Community mobilization officers who have been trained in the art of information and communication for development. Many of them are trained. Many of them have even attained tertiary level education and higher tertiary level education, master's degree program, senior officers level 14, level 15, heading the local government offices. But there is the challenge of capacity as to how to carry out these responsibilities effectively. So that is why partnership becomes necessary. We partner donor agencies in the area of health, especially UNICEF. We take communication to the people through the local government assembly, where we assemble citizens, women, youth, religious leaders, traditional rulers, because they have key role to play. Just like the National Orientation Agency is being held accountable to how much information is made available to the citizens, and we are also equally holding traditional and religious leaders accountable to how much they are able to impact on their followers. So we use this partnership. We use the platform to send out information. Be it on Sunday or on Saturday or on Fridays, the pastor or the imam, at the end of the sermon, just add 1 or 2 sentences about the need to be of good behavior, of the need to live by the dictates and the principles of the faith you profess. Even if that alone is achieved, that is a great deal, because it is the starting point for all of us to begin to select police.
Well, if we talk of the followership, what about the leadership? In this, I'm bringing you to this maxim, do the right thing. And I suppose that it should be applicable to both the followership and the leadership. If you tell the followers to do the right thing and the leadership doesn't do the right thing, will it work?
I will also going to give you another maxim, that a society does not actually rise above the quality of its leadership.
Right.
So the fundamental starting point actually is the leadership, really. Is the leadership question. Is the leadership question. This leadership question does not start from maybe the president or governor. No, the leadership question from the home, first and foremost, from the home. The head of the family should be able to give direct, must be able to give direct, concernable leadership to the family. But a family leader, a family head, who sees the children going astray and they cannot raise a finger, such a leader is only a leader in name. So the role of the leadership, in the context of what you are now asking me, is the role of national leadership, state leadership, local government leadership through formal governmental processes.
Yes.
So the president must be a president for all, must live by example, must be exemplary, must be of integrity, his honesty must not be in doubt, and he must be open to advice and must be open to criticism.
Right.
It should go down the line. But when you have leaders that conduct themselves like monarchs, and the leaders who are elected and have gotten public mandate, yet go conducting themselves like monarchs, then definitely you know that naturally there will be a disconnect. Naturally there will not be accessible to good information. Naturally they will not be accessible to good advice. Naturally they will only be paying, they will only be having an audience only those who will tell them what the ears will want to know, to hear, but not really what will prick the conscience and make them stand up to reality and live to expectation. So there is therefore both the role of the leader and the role of the follower. They complement one another. But the leader must be the one that will give the leadership which will make the follower actually follow. But when you have a leadership that is not that one you cannot be proud of, or a leader who is not confident, or a leader who cannot lead but it's only a leader in name, then definitely the followers will also be tempted to do likewise. And that is part of the problem that we are seeing over the years. Gradual erosion of quality leadership over the years at all levels, with concomitant effect on the economy, with concomitant effect on our politics, or with concomitant effect on our social and the cultural values.
Yeah, but it's good you raise this because for many people, when you talk of leadership, the first thing that jumps into their minds is leadership at the national level, meaning everything is the president. A lot of people don't bother so much about what happens below that level. And of course, like you yourself identified, the administration at local level is virtually non-existent.
Virtually non-existent.
And so there are no structures to revert to. So today Nigerians concentrate mostly on the center. What happens in Abuja? Abuja has suddenly become the beginning and the end of Nigeria. Should it be so?
It shouldn't be so at all. It should not be seen. It should not be so at all, because what is expected of the center has been identified in the Constitution. What is expected to be done by the state has been identified in the Constitution. What is expected of the local governments to do has been identified by the Constitution. So all the three levels of government I have identified derive their powers from the same source, which is the Constitution. That's one. Now, this now brings us, therefore, to the issue of resource and the resource allocation. To the issue of resource and the resource allocation, which also is now constitutionally defined. You know, now, does it work for the country? This is for Nigerians to decide. The present arrangement. And you will agree with me that quite a number of Nigerians, of respected men, you know, do believe that the arrangement needs to be revisited, to be looked at again, because it does not seem to be working. It's not for me to decide for the rest of the country whether it is working or it's not, but it is ultimately the decision of the larger body of what we call the Nigerian nation that will determine this. But point of responsibility must be point of responsibility and must be sufficiently identified and be held accountable for the actions or inactions that characterize their operations. In the states, in many of the states, when you hear, you know, it is quite amazing, for example, that by the time this government came into being in 2015, more than 2/3 of the states in this country were not paying salaries. But at the end of every month, the allocation from the federation account was going to them. There were many states at that time who were owing pensioners' salary. Many of these pensioners keep dropping the debt every morning of the week. You know, yet 6-7 months pensioners not being paid. Many of these of school teachers have not been paid. That is in spite of what the state are able to generate, no matter how meager, from what they are able to also draw from the federation account. You know, so that is why. So even when you have a governmental structure where basic issues like payment of salaries, gratuities, and the pensions and what have you cannot be done, how much will you expect of provision of social services, education, health? You need to go to our hospital and see. Over 30 years ago, they were being described as mere consulting clinics. Today, they are butcheries.
All right, still the leadership question and the process of recruitment and, of course, the process of acquiring leadership positions. The polity is beginning to witness so much activity, of course, because 2019 is not too far away. And Nigerians have been asked to go to the polls again and elect those who will be responsible for carrying out some of these things that we have talked about. Is the Nigerian population now adequately aware and representative of the true values expected of leaders? Because people are expressing worry and concerns. Threats all over the place, people moving camps from one place to the other, and you have analysts saying this is not necessarily about service to the people, but about service to self. How can the people's perception of these issues and their mindset be changed?
Through massive centralization and advocacy. But not massive mobilization and advocacy on the television screen and on the social media, and no. Through massive centralization and advocacy through multiple platforms. One of the platforms is the media, both electronic, print, and social. Because the media has now gone beyond the mere three functions of information, of informing, of educating, and of entertaining. The media has become an agenda setter. It has become an agenda setter. And it has become also an agenda setter, especially in this country with massive input and resources that we have in the emergence of the private media houses. Now, in this kind of situation, we are at a crossroad. First, the role of the media in setting the agenda for national revolts. But has the media itself undergone the process of self-policing? Has it? To what extent have we seen over the last few months? I can even go up to I can say up to 1 year back. To what extent, from what we have seen with the performance of the media, electronic and the print media in particular, to what extent have they self-policed? To what extent have they contributed towards national cohesion? To what extent, not that the media should not report the news, but the way and the manner in which the news is reported, to what extent has it encouraged national reverse, national cohesion, national integration? To what extent? To what extent has the reporting actually been devoid of partisanship? To what extent has it been devoid of consideration for profit over and above national interest? That's one. So the media is one platform that must be used effectively to send out the message to the people. Now, the radio in particular, to me, is a very effective one because of the very wide reach. Whether you have electricity or you don't have, you can buy 20, 30 naira battery and you can listen to the radio. Now, the print, and then the social media, which unfortunately we as a country have not put to positive use, which we have not used, which we have not put to positive use. How we could, there are national server laws. Are these server laws in sync with the realities of the moment? To what extent can we regulate without censoring what we see in the social media?
While not stopping you here, would you some have suggested some form of regulation? Are you in agreement with that?
I am absolutely in agreement with regulation. And we must also, in defining this, be very categorical about what we are setting out to do. Not censoring, regulation. Because at the end of the day, we must have to have a society before we can even do social whatever.
Well, still staying with the political climate now, a number of Nigerians are a bit confused. You have 91 political parties, and some would say we're still counting. 91 parties. And people say we are not seeing anything about ideology. It's all about just give me the power. Give me the power, and we don't even know what direction. So the average voter is confused. That's one part of it. The second part of it is, How do you even begin to change attitudes? We take, for instance, something like the voter registration exercise. People don't go. If there's 24 hours left, then you find millions turn up suddenly, and then there's a cry for an extension. The same thing. People register, and they don't pick up their cards. Now, when there's a deadline, millions turn up overnight, they want to pick up their cards. When it is time to vote, people sit back, they make a lot of comments on social media, and when voting time is almost over, hundreds of thousands turn up at voting centers attempting to vote. How do you begin to change that kind of...
Because this is still an attitudinal issue. This is actually also an attitudinal issue as much as it is a reflection of our political culture and the political practices. Now, in terms of political parties, yes, under the law, the National Independent Electoral Commission has no reason not to register these political parties, because that is what the law says. But at the end of the day, we know that these parties are only briefcase political parties. They will make any impact on the political on the political space, because Nigeria's politics has always been characterized by mainly two strong political parties. Even if these two strong political parties are similar in all respects. Now, the emerging scenario that I see, especially, I am not the spokesman for the ruling party, but the emerging scenario that I can see emerging is that perhaps after the 2019 elections, the APC would have sufficiently galvanized into an institution and begin to gradually develop a political ideology that will stand it from the rest of the pack. Because it is necessary so that the voter has a choice. But because the voter has very little choice, you still find that issues at the campaign are not issues. The campaigns are usually characterized by from where is the aspirant coming, what is his religious faith, how much has he been able to impact on his immediate environment. Meaning, if his politics is capital intensive, it's a capital intensive phenomenon. And most of it in all developed parts of the world go into logistics. Ours, and that is the main concern. Ours is the fact that it is money that goes out to compromise the system.
Right.
And that is why we as the National Orientation Agency find it imperative that we partner civil society, that we partner INEC, that we partner security agencies, that we partner religious leaders, that we partner traditional rulers. All of this towards achieving a common objective, that of making citizens aware, first and foremost, that vote selling and the vote buying is an offense under the law. That vote selling and the vote buying is an offense under the law. That's one. Two, for religious leaders to preach through subtle means and make citizens aware of the intricate relationship between selling vote and, by extension, therefore, not subjecting your conscience to rational thinking, but allowing maybe a token that you will just end up buying a recharge card with, and the resultant effect of your action is the emergence of a leader that you will never see until after 4 years again. Now, why are we seeing the issue of money, especially on election day, as worrisome? Because of what I have now said. And then secondly, it is a direct threat to the development of our democracy. A direct threat. So security agencies must be up and doing. Because I am up to now yet to see anybody who had been prosecuted for buying or for selling. But the number one culprits are the politicians. Because of desperation, because of lack of patriotism, because of wanting to compromise the system and not always wanting to play according to the rules of the game. And that is where the law must be made to apply.
Well, on the other side, and while not playing the devil's advocate, can you actually blame the politicians? What about the structures, the parties on whose platforms they emerge? Many Nigerians have expressed concerns about the high pecuniary requirements that parties have put in place for even the expression, the mere expression that you wish to offer services to the populace.
You are right, because and that's what I'm saying. And that is actually something that this is actually reflective. This is reflective of the social, the lack of sense of empathy on the part of the political parties. You know, because if you are actually, honestly, genuinely out to serve, I wonder how you will be made to cop out all of your savings and that of your relations and that of your neighbors and the friends and everybody just to collect an expression of interest from. And of course, the political parties in this case therefore have a role, a critical role to play. They need to take a second look at some of these issues before they become number one culprits in the monetization of our politics.
All right, still staying with the politics, because that's what's in the air now. How well has the NOA done in pushing the importance of the Nigerian project, in pushing these ideals that you've talked about throughout the length and breadth of this country, and particularly the question of violence, engaging in violence, disrespect for constituted authority, and, back to the same maxim, doing what is right.
Thank you. Now, as far back as March this year, we commenced a sensitization and advocacy campaign on drug addiction and the social biases. Campaign against drug addiction and the social biases. And we kick-started in Kano, reflected in Maiduguri, in Bauchi, and then all over the states of the Federation.
Okay.
Because we feel that we need to talk with National Drug Law Enforcement Agency. We need to talk with local government, social and community development officers. We need to reach out to schools. We need to bring out security agencies to look at all this. That's one. Two, extend this campaign. Bring in politicians so that you also have to talk to them, because they are the ones that find readily available fodder which they use to fuel incidences of violence during elections. The young men are the ones that are considered as the salt of the campaigns. They do the shouting during the campaigns. They snatch the ballot boxes during the election, or they protect the ballot boxes during the election. Whichever of the two that happens is usually done by these young men and women. So politicians must actually be patriotic and be God-fearing, so that you don't send your children to abroad to go and study and come back and be professionals while you are encouraging the children of the lower people to go into drug addiction simply for self-serving purposes.
Dr. Abari, there's so much more we would love to talk about, but time has just caught up with us. And I'm beginning to think that we might have to ask you to come again very soon so we can continue from where we stopped on this program.
It will be my pleasure.
How the NOA is carrying the message, and if we have seen any inkling of success. But I must ask you this as a parting shot. Do you think there's hope for this nation remaining one?
There is. There is. This country is too integrated to dissolve.
All right. At this point, we'd like to thank you for coming on this program. Dr. Garba Abari, Director General of the National Orientation Agency. Thank you for being here.
It is my pleasure.
And we will definitely ask you to come again.
It is my pleasure. I look forward to that.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Well, that's our program today. Next week, we'll be back with One-on-One. I am Cyril Stover. Bye for now.
Denim is one of the dominant parts of urban lifestyle. Everyone wants a piece of it. However, creating a unique look gives you the fashion statement you sure deserve. There are lots of creative ways you could transform your denim from being that boring piece to an artistic appeal. Promise Abu is a creative designer. He's about to create an incredibly detailed art on a denim shirt. Let's see how this will be achieved.
I'm using all this ink for the design. It's called an acrylic ink. I'm about to do it.
To my mind, it should be placed at the doorstep of states. And when we say states, not even as state governments, but as local governments, because tourism is local, it's community-based. But there must be intense collaboration with the federal, or with the federal government, because otherwise, how then do you connect interstates and taxation and all of those issues? But that slight gray area has caused a lot of I should be the person doing it, and we're putting away partnerships and collaboration at the feet of ego. So I'd like to speak to our state governments and the federal government, especially my colleagues at the NTDC, because they are supposed to help us with classification. You know, I do believe that NTDC is working very closely now, because I saw some minutes of some of the programs they're working on to collaborate with state governments in terms of doing classification within their various properties in their states. It's ongoing, and I look forward to a time when somewhere says they're 3-star, they actually are 3-star. Again, with the work we're doing at the NMC, the standardization requirements will now be, for everyone to see and know. You can't give yourself a rating. Your rating must come from an agency, either a private sector agency. It's not even compulsory that it's a government-owned agency, but it must be an agency that the entire stakeholders have confidence in, that to do the right auditing and then give the right classification. So my prayer is that between the NTDC...
Oh, you are praying as well?
Yes, okay. We're Nigerians, so we have to pray, but my prayer is always very progressive. So my prayer is that the ongoing, because it is ongoing, the ongoing collaboration between the NTDC, the NMC, and the state governments would see us having in the next 1 year the right classification for our hotel industry.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Balogun, Mrs. Chika Balogun, the DJ, National Institute for Hospitality and Tourism. Thank you very much for joining us on the program. And we also had join us Joseph Karim, Public Relations Officer, Federation of Tourism Association of Nigeria. He is also here with us in our Abuja studio. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
And Chikeze Oswago is a tourism consultant. He also elaborated on the issues we brought up today. Thank you very much, Chika. And Mrs. Adirunke Timsing, travel consultant, CEO, Mantle Travel and Tours. Thank you very much for joining us, madam. And via Skype from the UK, Lucky George, tourism consultant and a publisher. We appreciate your input also. Thank you very much. We'll take a short break now. We will be taking our second discussion after the break.
Your perfect family is under threat by germs. Infectious diseases are now the world's biggest killer of adults and children. Every day, 16,000 children under the ages of 5 and thousands of adults die from infectious diseases. These infectious diseases are caused by germs. They are everywhere. An average human being comes in contact with over 1 million germs daily in unclean water, dirty surfaces, in the toilets, on cuts and wounds, on your clothes. Germs can cause deadly diseases like typhoid, diarrhea, flu, and cough. To protect your family from germs, use the power of Dettol's One Capful for surface cleaning in your bathing water, in your laundry water, for first aid to protect your family from up to 100 illness-causing germs. Be Dettol Sure, endorsed by the Nigerian Medical Association.
Use Dettol Skin Jelly, which protects against germs for a healthy, smooth skin every day.
Nigerians. Suicide bombers are not spirits. They are not ghosts. They are human beings like you and me. They live amongst us. They are your neighbors. They are your friends today, but terrorists tomorrow. So you must know your neighbor now. Security begins with you and me. Know your neighbor. Be vigilant. Be security conscious. Report suspicious persons, objects, and movements to the police and other security agencies. The security of our nation is a duty for you and me.
If you see something, say something. Nigeria, unite against terrorism. This message is brought to you by the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture.
Oh boy, climb this thing now. Not be only to connect lights.
Come you and yourself now.
Now wow. Oh boy, calm down now. Oga Kasali electrician, who would they look for with this?
Oh.
Oga Kasali, come help us fix this wire now.
Sorry, I no longer carry out illegal connection. It puts the lives of people at risk and can cause fire outbreak and disrupt power supply. I will never be part of anything that has to do with this any longer because change begins with me.
Oh boy, letting him talk makes sense. Oh boy, we could carry this ladder from over.
This message is brought to you by the National Orientation Agency in conjunction with the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture.
And joining us now to discuss the lives and times of Kofi Annan is Ambassador Usman Serki. Is the former Deputy Permanent Representative of Nigeria to the United Nations. Thank you very much for joining us, Your Excellency.
Thank you.
And also in the studio with us, Dr. Obadiah Melafia, former Deputy Governor of the CBN and a Public Affairs Analyst. Thanks for joining us once again in the studios. Well,
all right, let's begin with Ambassador Usman Serki. Kofi Annan has gone home at the age of 80. What are your lasting impressions of him?
Dignity. He conveyed and exuded a dignity that is rarely captured in a high-profile public figure of his stature. And that dignity, coupled with humility, endeared him to everybody that he came in contact with. And I think that was the strongest trait or attribute that he had that enabled him to make people relaxed, composed, and calm when they were with him. And that gave him mileage in persuading other world leaders to see his point of view and accommodate different opinions that he was giving them in terms of convincing them to settle differences. And I think that was the hallmark of a great diplomat. And that dignity is what I think the lasting impression I had of him, apart from the accomplishments he did in office, which we'll hopefully speak about later.
And Dr. Melafia, you tell us about this man, Kofi Annan.
Well, actually, unlike the ambassador, I never had the privilege of meeting him in person. But, you know, I followed his career very closely. He struck me as a man of great dignity, as he said, always calm under pressure. I've read a lot about him and followed very closely his career. I think that he was not just an ambassador for Ghana, he was an ambassador for West Africa, he was an ambassador for Africa. People forget that Kwame Nkrumah, when Ghana got independence in 1957, Kwame Nkrumah believed in this idea of African personality. So he identified very bright young men and young women and send them to the best schools in the world. Send them to places like Harvard, MIT, Oxford, Cambridge. And Kofi Annan was one of those people. He groomed them to showcase the best that Africa had to offer. And I'm happy to say that the late Kofi Annan did not disappoint.
All right, thank you. Back again to Ambassador Sarki. In terms of accomplishments, I mean, ultimately was United Nations Secretary General. There's no diplomatic position in the world, higher than that if you are an international civil servant. Yes. What did he achieve?
He achieved a lot in two areas. First, in terms of internal reorganization of the United Nations itself. In the 70s and 80s, the United Nations reached the doldrums, as it were, in terms of its credibility, acceptability, and impact on people in the world. Reputational aspects of the United Nations were being attacked by the major powers, and its inadequacies were exposed at every turn. When he became Secretary General in 1992, the first thing he did was not to take a tour of the world or make some grandiose pronouncements. He took a calm look at the United Nations and said, I need to restructure the system. So he introduced what was called the system-wide coherence. That was to restructure the UN, its functionality, to bring it to closer to people around the world. And then he took on some systemic re-examination of the Charter of the United Nations to align it with the realities and objectives that were obtaining in the world at that time. He brought about, for instance, this idea of, having the, United Nations address its core functions, the Charter responsibilities. First, maintenance of international peace and security. Secondly, protection and promotion of human rights. And thirdly, sustainable development. How do you do that? You need to align all the functions of the United Nations towards those three streams. And he established the high-level panel of eminent persons, about 10 or 11 people, to look at the security, structure, challenges in the world and advise him. And they brought out this very fine document, about 104 pages, on global challenges in terms of security. The next one was actually, he said, is the United Nations meeting the expectations of the people? And he set up this called a panel to bring out a report called Enlarger Freedom. And that Enlarger Freedom recommended some far-reaching reform of the United Nations. For instance, the establishment of the Human Rights Council to replace the Commission on Human Rights was Kofi Annan's initiative and achievement. The establishment of the Peace-Building Commission to structure and coordinate all peace-building and peacekeeping efforts in the world, particularly in Africa, was his accomplishment. The reform of the United Nations, he gave momentum to that. He did not see its fruition, but he gave momentum to that. And a lot has been done in terms of the fundamental normative aspects of the reform of the United Nations. He also actually streamlined aid delivery, assistance, development assistance, HIV/AIDS, support in terms of resources and materials to countries. So I think Kofi Annan, more than any other Secretary General, touched the lives of people in many countries. And don't forget his persistent, dogged determination to avoid conflict in Iraq, for instance, in Lebanon and Israel and other places. So these are lasting legacies that any African can be very happy and proud to attribute to Kofi Annan and to accept as our collective achievement.
Thank you, Ambassador. Dr. Melafia, these are lofty achievements that any African will be very proud of. So no doubt Africa has lost a son that everybody feels it, that this is a big son of Africa that has left us. Are we grooming others? You talked of grooming the other time. Are we grooming others to fill his position, especially in areas of peace building around the world and in Africa in particular, with all the conflicts going on?
Well, I'm not sure whether we are doing enough.
And should we be doing?
We should be doing much more. brilliant people don't just emerge like that. They are normally groomed, they are normally guided. Our elders, our leaders have a very important role to play in grooming a new generation of leaders. And actually, you know, young men and young women that we can encourage to take up international civil service and international responsibility. And if I may add to what the ambassador has said, Kofi Annan had certain advantages. He was very long in the system. He was recruited as a budget officer as far back as 1962 at WHO.